Well, thank you. Now, of course, our other legal expert is Clark Brewster, who is joining me right now, and he defended Robert Bates during his trial. So you heard Adam's opinions, and you and I have been speaking, but you were saying probably the most interesting thing about this case is actually how Officer Shelby was charged.
Yes. They charged her with first-degree manslaughter,
Right.
which is based upon heat of passion or fear. And police officers are placed right in that situation, and the justifiable homicide defense says if you're defense of yourself in fear of some action against you, you can use deadly force. So the very defense, justifiable homicide, is one of the elements in the first-degree manslaughter charge. So it's a very, very unusual setting.
So now I want to take it back now because she could be given 4 years to life in prison, but she could also get probation. And I know that's not something that the jury actually recommends, but that's what the judge could recommend?
Yeah, the judge in this state is the person who sentences.
Okay.
The jury can make a recommendation as to years, but the judge makes the determination as to whether it's prison or not.
Now, you have heard this case, you've seen it through also, followed it very closely. What do you think will be the outcome hearing everybody's testimony?
Well, it's hard to,
I know you
postulate,
can't,
but
right.
I think she'll be acquitted. This is a case that, in my opinion, should not have been brought. This is a case that appears to be a law officer that was faced with a situation and in good faith reacted to that. And if we charge everyone and using hindsight or a second guess, that's an exposure to our police force that should never be there.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because you think that she will be acquitted, but people are saying that she shot when he had nothing in his car, no gun on him, no gun in his car, PCP found in his car later on, but he was not on drugs. And at the school where he was coming from, they said he was in high spirits, he was happy and jovial. And what about that side then, too, that she was just acting on emotion?
All the things you just said were learned after the fact. So my point is, when you put a law enforcement officer in a position and they have to make a split-second decision, there can be regrets, or you can look back and say, had I known this, I wouldn't have done that. But she's in a position that she felt fearful of, that she reacted, and I think we're seeing some snippet of the video stream that really doesn't give the full context to what occurred.
So everything that we're learning after the fact in the trial, then are you maybe saying or leading to the fact that she was charged too early?
I think she was charged, just like Mr. Bates was charged, as a reaction to what the public might say or do, and we need to take politics and that kind of public pressure out of the decision-making process, and I'd be pretty critical of the way the decision came down in this instance.
Interesting. Okay, so now we know that they are probably hearing their closing arguments, from what I understand. Can you give us the timeline of from when they're hearing closing arguments to when they're giving the jury instructions to what they actually do when they're back in the jury chambers?
Yeah. It's interesting, the jury system, everyone thinks that they've got a pretty good understanding of it, but this jury would have been presented facts without really knowing the law. All the way through and not knowing what was really important as it might pertain to some issue of the law until the end. So at the end of listening to all that evidence...
And that's not normally how it goes.
No, it usually is.
Okay.
It usually is, but what I'm saying is, so you're listening and wondering whether this statement's important or this fact is important, and you have it in your notes or your thinking, and then you don't know the law until the end. So the jury is given these legal instructions, and then they're trying to go back to those facts and trying to apply them to those instructions. And in a case like this, honestly, and in the Bates case and several others, the narrative has already been set. And in this day and age, with jurors having access to social media the way they do, it's very dangerous to use your gut instead of relying on the law.
Yeah, and this has been a fascinating case also. And, you know, with some of the other cases that have been going on across the country, they have been violent. They have been very ugly. Here they have been peaceful protests, which, you know, kudos to Tulsa for doing that also and handling that. But what if she is acquitted? what then?
Well, I think that's the great thing about our system. If she's acquitted, that should be respected. The evidence was presented in a courtroom, and the jury made their decision. And I always have great respect for the jury's decision. I think this casts a pall over law enforcement. It really does.
Yeah.
And for a young man or a young woman that wants to be in law enforcement, they have to look back, and one mistake, you can be placed in prison. I really think that this should have got more light of day decision making than to charge this lady with a felony.
So now here's kind of the million-dollar question that we're all asking. How long do you think the jury will take? Because usually if it's a short time behind closed doors, it's one thing. If it's a long time, it's something else.
No, not necessarily. Usually the jury in a case like this is pretty straightforward on the facts, will have reached their decision. And now it's just a matter of putting their thought processes in a more full setting, a deliberative setting, and then looking at the law. I expect they'll return a verdict today.
Do you really?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you. All righty, as we move on, we are following every angle of this case on air, online at kjrh.com, and there is a special section with details on the shooting, the rallies that followed, and of course the trial, and we will update it with very foremost information and the latest information that we get.